Welcome to the Do Life Well podcast. Join your host, Gavin Merwin, and his guests as they explore the nature of doing life well. Now, let's dive in.
Welcome back to another episode of the Do Life Well podcast. Super excited to be joined with my best friend, Stanton Moore, today. Do Life Well podcast, we're looking for ways to do life better, right? And today's topic we're super excited about. It's the necessity of community and how we sharpen one another. And a super important topic, and we're going to dive into a couple of different things today as we talk through what it means to be in community and things of that nature. But hope you guys enjoy it, and thanks for being here.
Oh man, I'm honored to be here.
Yeah.
It's going to be fun.
100%. It's like we were saying before, it's we've got our outline, we follow a flow, but it just kind of flows, you know what I mean?
Yes.
But yeah, I think framing it up, right? So community, why it's important, why we need it. Isolation's not a good thing, and we've talked about how to be healthy and suffering and all these things, but doing it together, I think, is important.
Absolutely.
And so, even from a biological perspective, right? So I said, even just start, because we're going to get into some spiritual stuff, take spiritual out of it for a second and just think about just humans as animals. It's interesting. I was reading a study from 2015, Holt Lundstad, and it talked about loneliness, right? So I just mentioned isolation. Obviously, through COVID, we saw a lot of that kind of thing. And it literally found that loneliness and social isolation are linked to an increased risk of premature mortality.
Wow.
Comparable to obesity or smoking.
Wow.
So yes, we need to exercise, we need to eat well, we don't need to smoke, right? But we need to be in community. There's a biological need. And I think, if you think about it, even though it's negative, why do kids join gangs? It's a desire to belong. It's a desire to be in a community. So intro into that. Talk about that for a second.
So many thoughts when we're looking at the overview, just some general framework type thoughts for this episode. First of all, I gotta honor my friend, man. Gavin and I have been doing life together now for a really long time.
Yeah.
And love this man and his family with all of my heart. So if you're listening to the Do Life Well podcast, you're in good company, and you're being led on this podcast by just an incredible man that I love dearly.
Appreciate it.
His wife, his girls, man, just amazing. And it's a real joy to walk together. Also, the men that he's had on this podcast are some of my dearest friends in the world. So, man, the episodes previously, I've had the opportunity to listen and love some of the content, man, that's coming out of this podcast. So, in regards to community, Psalm 68 comes to my mind immediately. God takes lonely people. And he puts them in families. All the way, if you track it all the way back to the garden, it's not good for you, Adam, to be by yourself.
100%.
You need a helper. You need a companion. Somebody to do life well. Somebody to do life well with.
Yeah, that's right.
So it begins there. We're made. Gavin brought up the biological makeup of us and how we're wired. We're made for it. We're not made for isolation. And I have just so found the joy of it. I have found the success that's found with it. My friend John Tanner and I, not to make a weird plug, but we do a podcast just like this, really informal. We just get on here and talk about things that are on our heart and collaborate. But I made a statement on there the other day. I said, everybody kind of frowns at, it's not what you know, but it's who you know.
Sure.
But it really is who you know.
Yeah, sure.
Not in the sense of uppity, weird marketing type way, but just our relationships are important.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, if I can honor the men and women that God puts in my life, if I can honor those relationships, then the things and the knowledge that they have can then begin to open doors. Not that we're trying to manipulate relationships, but so much happens. There's so much flourishing and blossoming that happens inside of community, and it satisfies our soul, man. I mean, I've found tremendous joy in doing life together. So
100%. No, and it's interesting. What something that came to my mind when we were talking about people who'd been on before is like, so Chris was in the Marines, and we had a younger guy that someone asked or told Chris, hey, he's thinking about going to the Marines. Tell him the hardest thing about the Marines. And like without thinking, Chris was like, leaving, getting out, and obviously there's a lot of other reasons, but I think a piece of that is like, man, you had this like brotherhood, you had this companionship, you were with these people sun up, sun down every single day, and that's how the disciples lived, and that's how people lived, and we have to be more intentional to do that, to be together and things of that nature. So
absolutely,
I don't know, it's just in us.
I feel like our world kind of competes with this
Yeah.
Essential reality.
Yeah.
Our culture and our world competes, and it fights to keep you hidden and isolated by yourself. It's like, man, pound out work, pound out life, and figure it out on your own. And I just don't know that that's the best way. I don't know that it's, this is a spiritual podcast too. I mean, I don't know if it's God's way.
Yeah.
Man, so much we could say.
Yeah.
So much that we could say
Yeah.
in regards to community. So.
No, and I think too, it's like there's no such thing as a self-made man. No one ever got there on their own in business or in anything. It takes wisdom. It takes, and I'd even put down like Proverbs 27:17, iron sharpening iron. What does that mean though? Like we know it, we hear it, and it's like having a healthy community where there's trust, there's relationship. Well, then you can sharpen each other. Like I haven't done it in a while, but I've made knives. Like I blacksmith knives. I have a forge, I have an anvil, all that. But like iron sharpening iron. I mean, you're literally banging a piece of metal. It's very violent. It's not a peaceful process. And that's sometimes how friendships are. And where there's again that level of trust and love. And hey, I'm not trying to dig you. Like you rub against each other, and it knocks off the rough edges. Hey, I see this in you. You see this in me. Here's something I think you can work on. Well, you don't get any of that if you're alone. I think is the point. You know what I mean? Like
that's exactly right.
You don't get. You can obviously see in the mirror, but a lot of times you don't see in the mirror what others see. And if it's through love, they can iron sharpen iron. And that's what that means. And they can say, hey, you responded in this way. All good, but maybe you respond this way instead. That would come across a little bit better, or whatever it is,
Yeah.
But if you're not in that community, you're not getting that. And I think a lot of people have and we can even get into like the biblical foundation of it, a sense of getting saved, going to heaven. That's it. Like that's the goal. And you even preached on this recently, and it's like obviously salvation's important, but we just weren't meant to do life alone. And so again, whether that's a kid joining a gang or a person joining a gym, like obviously those are ways of community. For a lot of people, it's joining a church family, even supplementing all those things. Like I have my gym friends. I obviously have church folks. Some of those are together. I have work, But yeah, you're just not meant to do it alone. And I think some people have that idea of like, hey, I don't need church. I don't need to go. So yeah, talk about that.
Life would be rather boring, I think.
Yeah.
Kind of incomplete. I was thinking about, Gavin, when you were talking about the iron sharpening iron and you're forging with your knives. Great example of friendship, community, doing life together collectively as a family and as a unit. Number one, the Bible speaks of this. One can put 1,000, but two puts 10,000.
Yeah.
And there's not just an addition, but there's a multiplication that begins to happen when I have strengths, Gavin has strengths, but we also have weaknesses.
Yeah.
And I'm weak in areas that Gavin is probably strong in, and maybe I've got some strengths that Gavin's maybe weaker in. And as we do life together, we're helping each other get formed into the men of God that He ultimately wants us to be.
Yeah.
But that would never happen if we never open ourselves up to one another. And also, I was thinking about, Gavin knows I'm not that handy. But with a hammer, man, almost, I mean, that's what friendships are like. It chisels us.
Yeah.
It's like that ice sculpture that has to be chiseled out a certain way in order for it to be full and complete. I do preach for a living, so I have verses that pop through my head, so y'all bear with me. I'm not preaching a sermon. But in the Old Testament, the Bible speaks about Solomon's temple and how each stone, probably getting ahead of myself a little bit here, but this is a great analogy for what you spoke about. I was like, man, I got to say this. In the Old Testament, Solomon, who was David's son, who gets the opportunity to do what was in David's heart all along, which was build a temple. Hey, David, you're not going to do it, but your son's going to get to do it. Awesome. Man, we're people that care about generations and legacy, and man, we can preach that. That's awesome. So Solomon gets to do it, but it says that he takes these bricks and he takes them to the quarry so that the bricks can get chiseled out and fit together with the other bricks.
Yeah.
Well, now, New Testament believers, we have now become those bricks, or like 1 Peter 2 says, we are stones.
Sure.
We are stones that are alive, that are being built up, what? Together.
Yeah.
Gavin, do you know that in the New Testament, bro, there are over 50 New Testament passages that use the word together? There's a level of togetherness that God so longs for his children to operate with, because he knows the life, and here's a big one, the fruit that comes from doing life with each other.
100%. No, and some language we've been using lately, even up here at the office, has been the ecosystem.
There you go.
And you think about it from going back again to a nature, biological way, because sometimes it's hard for people to reconcile from a financial perspective. Sell all of your belongings, put it all into a community. No one should have lack, right? All right. Well, how does that translate? Like, literally, you want me to sell everything I have? Maybe, I don't know.
It's a paradigm.
I don't think so. But my point is, there is this ecosystem where it's like, all right, hey, you've got a situation I know you're going through. I can help you with that financially. I've got a situation I'm dealing with, some conflict. You can come in because you've got a counseling gift, whatever, right? I mean, it's the ecosystem. And I guess, like, because you obviously want to stay positive and not talk about negative, but that's, a lot of people don't have that at church, I guess is what I'm trying to communicate. It's a
kind of just checking a box.
Yeah, it's more of a Sunday morning. I go, and hey, if that's what you want, that's great, But again, I think it's like, even what you've, again, been preaching lately is, what is it unto? And it's like, obviously, we want people to be saved. Going to church on Sunday morning is great. That's a great way for you to have some connection, go deeper with God, all those things. But you're just missing a big part of the plan, I think. If you're not really going deep with community, you're not doing things with each other, you're not supporting one another. And even on the flip side of that, using the ecosystem. I mean, we're like, hey, you have the flip side of that where a person wants to receive benefit from the ecosystem but make no contribution, and then you have to have those conversations around, and Hunter was talking about, and I'll screw it all up, but there's 3 different types, parasite or whatever, in an ecosystem. Like, one's not contributing nothing, it's only receiving. One's giving and taking, one's only giving, or something like that. You know what I mean? So I don't know, I guess, like, just hitting on that again and again, where it's just like, you need to be plugged in with people. Like, obviously isolation's not good, we've talked about that. Obviously there's a biblical framework for doing life together, there's all these benefits from it, and not only benefiting for yourself, others benefit too. Like, that's a thought I just had. Like, I think it's important for, like, we've talked about it, like at church, where you're not there, not you, but a person, you're not there, a stone was missing. And it's not about perfect attendance, but like, people contribute because it is a community. It is you know what I'm saying? Everybody brings something different. And when you're not present, that stone's missing. And you're like, hey, we need that gift, or we need that contribution.
Yes.
We need that lens so that we can all together have that lens, because everybody has a different perspective,
Talk about every joint and ligament supply.
Yeah.
If we can't say to the ear that we don't have need of it, because we got to hear somehow.
For sure.
We can't say to the eye, we don't have need of you. Well, how else would we see? I was thinking about, as you were talking, Gavin, I was thinking about, there's this book that's called The Culture Code. talks a lot about what you were speaking in regards to and in context of an ecosystem.
Yeah.
And I was reading about Coach Greg Popovich, and he was talking. This book speaks about how he builds his staff and the way that he builds his program and the way that he leads this culture that's called the San Antonio Spurs. And one of the most winningest coaches. I think maybe at one point he was the most winningest coach that there was. In certain contexts and certain percentages, whatever. Okay.
Sure.
But anyway, good leaders put around them not yes men that can just do what they do well and everybody can just flow because we're all like robots.
Yeah.
Sure. Man, we want to have a diverse, not a culture that just conforms, because that's like a perverted way of thinking about unity and community.
Yeah.
We're not trying to produce a bunch of people that think, act, talk, live, whatever. Doing life well should probably all look pretty similar.
Sure. If
we have certain values that Gavin's been talking about on the podcast. But as a general rule, we all bring something very different to the table.
Yeah.
And if we can learn to kind of swallow our pride and our arrogance a little bit and come to the table to say, man, what do you bring? I want that. There's a lot of life that can begin to happen. And I bring up Coach Popovich because reading about him and the way that he built his culture and his coaching staff was speaking to me the other day, specifically in regards to building an ecosystem. So maybe if you're a leader, and you're listening to this and you're looking for people to recruit, you're looking for people to join your team, if you will, whether that be, business or marketplace or ministry or whatever that looks like, man, build people around you that bring something different to the table.
100%.
If you're good at math, find somebody that's good at science.
Yeah.
If you're, whatever, man, you get the point. It's just important to be multifaceted so that we can create a full picture that can minister to not just one or two or three, but the masses.
100%.
And that's the way you do that, I think.
Oh yeah, no, and even with that, from a business perspective, I mean, you just don't see the world from every angle. It's impossible to.
It's impossible.
I mean, that's why you need people around you that see things differently, so that they can say, hey, here's a perspective you may not have thought about.
There you go.
And that can be, like you said, diverse. That can be male versus female.
Yes.
That can be different race. That can be different age. I mean, there's all these different barometers, and that's what I love about our community is I don't know how the youngest is the youngest. It's a baby. You know what I mean? The oldest, I would assume, probably in their 70s, I would guess.
Yeah.
And a wide range in between. Here at the office, same way. Varying of ages, varying of, diversity, and I don't know, it's just, yeah, I mean, for leaders, get out of your way, get out of your own way. You know what I mean? Don't be fearful of being challenged, and I think that's one thing that has been modeled well to us, and probably a genesis for the reason I want to do this podcast is it's like, I'm very fortunate to have a lot of good people in my life modeling things that if you don't have the same community we do, because obviously people that have been on are a part of our community, then you could probably glean from. And just run through the topics again. You know what I mean? Like Trevor talking about health and wellness, Jared talking about technology, Chris talking about suffering, John talking about fatherhood and marriage, us talking about community. I want to have, others on talking about wealth. I mean, I'm just saying, like, it's just important to have that community. In a lot of ways, I hadn't thought about it. I mean, this podcast is kind of that. It's bringing together those different perspectives and sharing those. So, I love that. Absolutely. And hey, everybody can't be Michael Jordan, going to basketball. But if it was him versus 5 other people, he wouldn't have been Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
I mean, he needed 4 teammates. You know what I'm saying?
And it seemed like, I could be wrong about this, and I don't know when this idea of like the super team or the mega team started happening, but I don't remember that being the case maybe a decade ago or so.
Sure.
It seems like it's a newer reality that should have probably been a practice of a lot of us more consistently than what it was in the past. However, we're here today, and what a lot of sports teams, organizations, man, your Googles and your Apples and folks like this, and what they're figuring out is, man, like we need teamwork, we need collaboration, and we are not maximizing our profits. If we lack in this area, we're not reaching the people and impacting the people and influencing the people that we could if we were doing it this way, we were executing this way. And so yeah, man,
it's a circle, not a ladder.
There you go.
You know, it's a circle, and it's I forget it every time. This comes up every time, and I can never remember what it's called. But the Navy SEALs use it, where it's like whoever the master is of this topic, you're leading in that moment.
There you go.
You know, so like if you're going in and you need to breach a door, and you're the door breach expert, you know what I mean? You're leading. The rank doesn't matter. You know, you're the expert. You go do it, and then as soon as your task is done, we're back in a unit. You know, who has the expertise?
I've kind of found that in cultures that don't model this, apathy, complacency, lots of bitterness can kind of start to seep in, because it creates this individualistic mentality that's almost like a cancer in the organization, in the business, in the church, whatever. And then it's kind of like, my opinion doesn't matter, you know, whatever. And listen, man, there's a time and a place. I get it. But anyway, I just would really encourage those of you that are listening to go all in and submerge yourself, not just with anybody, any team, just for the sake of, I'm in community.
Yeah, sure.
But man, like passions, kindred spirit, and you need to find your tribe. You know, your purpose is oftentimes found within the tribe, within the cluster. So.
Yeah. Well, so two things that I think about there. One, talk about the potter's wheel. Talk about what that means, how you stay on it. Because I think being in community is a key way he keeps us on the wheel.
No doubt.
And then I think the other thing too is like practical perspective. Even in healthy culture, offense happens. Even in healthy culture, misunderstandings happen. So talk through like practical ways of, because I think sometimes people have unfair expectations of leaders of, hey, we said we were this, we said it was this way, you know, and it's like the only person that's not going to let you down is the Lord.
Absolutely.
But we don't always, I mean, like I say it, and then you're like, yeah, of course. But then when you get in real life, you're like, hey, you let me down, and now I'm going to go find a new tribe. And you're like, hey, if that's great, you know, it's funny, I told somebody recently, hey, it's my job to drive the bus. People get on, people get off, I got to be at peace with that. This person texted me 2 weeks later and was like, hey, is there still room on the bus?
I want to be on the bus. Don't throw me off.
Yeah, exactly. But that doesn't mean, I don't know, I think just a lot of church growth happens from just people bouncing around, you know, and being unwilling to just like find a team, find a group of people, and be willing to be long-suffering, you know, because it doesn't matter how close you are with somebody, even your spouse, like they're going to let you down, they're going to offend you. Because we're just people. We're humans. Like, well, nobody's perfect. So, yeah, I don't know. Hit those two topics.
So, Gavin has 2 daughters. I have a daughter and a son. And I brought up this analogy in my teaching on Sunday about, we'll use his children as an example. So, Emma Claire, his oldest daughter, if Gavin and Jess prepared a meal for her tonight, and she didn't like the meal that was provided, she's not going to say, hey, I'm going to go down. She may say it. It's not going to go over real well. And it's certainly not going to happen.
Sure.
But she's not going to say, again, or it wouldn't happen, hey, I'm just going to go live with Uncle Stanton and Aunt Abby.
Yeah.
That's not going to work out.
Yeah.
You know, her last name is Merwin. That's her parents. My point is that's covenant family.
Yeah.
And we treat this topic, for whatever reason, very differently than how we would treat our own family and the way that we would think about our own family. And rather than it being 2 separate worlds, I think we've tried to draw this weird line between what's sacred and what's secular. But like maybe the Lord in this season is trying to erase that weird line and say, man, like, the kingdom of God and life in general, if we're born again, you know, life in the kingdom, it should look like healthy family.
Yeah.
And Gavin just hit the nail on the head. It's, man, I know that I'm going to get offended. I know that I may get hurt from time to time. I will get wounded in community, but I also get healed in community.
Yeah.
James, and we're going to talk about the potter's wheel, James the brother of Jesus, he says, confess your sins to one another so that your hearts can be healed. Ephesians 5, whatever is in the dark, stay sick. Whatever's brought in the light, God heals. And if it's not hidden, then it gets lit up. The point is, man, we want our hearts, we're 3 parts, body, soul, and spirit, but we want our mind, will, and our emotions to be healthy.
Yeah.
And if we're just harboring and storing up all of this tension with one another and not actually getting it out in the open, then we just kind of live life very bitter.
Yeah.
But I've never seen, Gavin, well, we'll leave room, okay, because anything is possible. But 99.9% of the time, when you go to the person that you're in community with and you have a conversation, bro, let's be real. In over 2 decades of friendship, it's not like it happens all the time, but there's times where, bro, I piss you off.
Yeah, sure.
And there's going to be times that you may rub me the wrong way.
That's right.
That's just real, man. We try to run away from that, but it's real. But one thing that I so value and honor about our community is, man, this is massive. But how quick we are to say, I blew it there, man.
Yeah.
You know, and then the willingness to accept that.
Yeah.
Man, I accept that. I appreciate that. That means a lot.
Yeah.
And then it's a good thing talking about ministering to men. Men can have that moment, bro. We're off like next day.
It's over,
bro. Let's go get coffee. Let's go
Yeah.
work out. Whatever. Let's go play golf. Men then duke it out. Women, sometimes it takes them a little bit longer. Male and females are different. It's just the way that God made it.
That's right.
So anyway, I just wanted to maybe add that to this. Jeremiah 18, the Bible says, the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah saying, go to the potter's house. There was something that God wanted to speak to Jeremiah at the potter's house. And he says, the clay that the potter, I'm paraphrasing, but the clay that the potter was making had gotten marred, maybe damaged, and he makes a whole nother vessel as it seemed good to the potter.
Yeah.
So that's the context when Gavin speaks of this that we're talking about. And inside of community, we get marred. That's why I said all of that. Sometimes we get hurt, we get offended. Sometimes we can get a little angry and bitter or whatever. But if we don't stay on the potter's wheel, our wounds never mature and turn into scars.
Yeah.
And God doesn't want us to live or lead or love from a place of our wounds. He rather wants us to live, love, and lead from our scars. And if wounds never turn to scars, if we don't do anything about them, and oftentimes do we need to confess it to the Lord and talk to God about it? Of course. But man, we probably need to find a brother.
Yeah.
We need to find a sister. And don't go spoiling everything that's precious to you to just anybody.
Yeah, that's right.
You need somebody that's wise, that's mature,
Trustworthy.
that you trust.
Yeah.
Because nowadays, man, you can't trust that many people.
That's right.
You go tell your deepest, darkest stuff to them, it's liable to be on social media the next day.
Yeah, that's right.
And you're like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, what did I just do?
Yeah.
So anyway, the potter's wheel and the way that community plays a part in that is absolutely a part of the potter's wheel. You got a potter, you got clay. We're the clay.
Yeah.
You got the house. Well, house represents family.
Yeah.
House represents community, the place that we're planted, the place that we do life. And all of that, man, there's a lot happening. There's there's imagery there where you can see the potter, there we are, we're on the clay, and he's making us.
Yeah.
And one of the primary ways that he makes us, he shapes us, one way that you could translate it is he shapes us, is doing life with other people.
Yeah. No, 100%. No, and it's the concept of like your dad told us forever ago, just keep leaning.
Yeah.
You know, like we've used that analogy of like, you know, there are seasons where you're like really pressing in with your relationship with the Lord. There are seasons when you're not as much, but like, let's just not go backwards. Let's just always be leaning forwards, you know, and leaning into the things. Like you have seasons where it's like, you know, you're busy, you got a lot going on, you got a lot on your plate, and you're not as intentional. But I think that's also where community helps, because it's like, if you just keep hanging out with people, and I think practically speaking, for those that aren't a part of our church, because obviously we go to church together, what does that mean? It doesn't just mean going to church.
No.
You know what I mean? Like when we say being a part of a community, I don't mean just going on a Sunday morning. It doesn't even necessarily have to do with the church. You can meet someone through that venue, but you may go work out together. You may go out and just eat. The kids may come over and you may Friday night just grill out and hang out. Like, it's just being together. Again, going back to what Chris said about the Marines, what was the hardest part of leaving? Or what was the hardest part? Leaving. Right? Well, it's like, why? I mean, again, I'm sure there's other reasons, but one of them was you're always together. Now, like, were they always doing the same thing? No, right? I mean, there were times they were sleeping, there was times they were marching, there were times, you know what I mean? It's the same thing. But I guess just having the desire, let me back up. I think all of this has the assumption of a person having the desire to grow.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's an important underlying assumption that we haven't really hit on, that we need to. Like, all of this stuff we're talking about is the baseline of, as a person, you desire to grow. And like, for me, I pray almost every day, Lord, teach me to be a better husband today than I was yesterday, a better friend today than I was yesterday, a better business person today than I was yesterday. And not out of like a striving or I got to figure it out, but just having that desire of, I'm improving. I'm better today than I was yesterday across all facets, fitness, business, church, family, every aspect of my life. I have a desire to grow and be better, right?
Yes.
If you don't have that, none of this probably matters. But I'm just saying, like,
yeah.
If you, and everybody does, obviously, everybody wants to grow, everybody wants to do better. A way to do that, I guess, is my point, is being in community and not being isolated. And it just helps you stay on the potter's wheel because, again, you have different lenses, you have different perspectives. Anytime I have to have one of those hard conversations, I'm almost always bringing Jess into the fold. Because I'm like, you obviously know me more intimately than anybody else. Tell me the blind spots that I might have, because I probably have them. I mean, because I view something a certain way, that other person views something a certain way. What do you see? Yes. And she obviously, I do trust her. She's my spouse.
That's wise, yeah.
And to a lesser degree, probably that's what community does.
Yeah. Meaning,
maybe not quite the level of your spouse, but you could have 3, 4, 5, 10, whatever, one person in that community that you can do the same thing with. And God uses that to shape and mold. Which I think brings another thing that just comes to mind, talking about the numbers, like 1, 10, 3, whatever.
Okay.
Practically speaking, something like I've had to get at peace with is in larger communities, you may have pockets of smaller sub-communities. Mm-hmm. And obviously you have to be careful because it's not like cliques or whatever, right? There's not the favorites and the not.
I'm going to pull something up. Keep talking.
100%. But it's a practical thing I think we need to talk about, because not everybody, you mentioned kindred spirits and hearts. Everybody doesn't connect with everybody.
Yep.
I don't think. I have a genuine appreciation and a love for everybody that goes to Burn Culture, but I don't have the same kindred connection that I do with a handful of men, right? And so I think just being at peace with that, and if there's a situation where you're on the receiving end of that, where you're like, I don't know why me and that person don't connect. Like, am I not a part of the club? Like, what's the deal with that? You know what I mean? It's like, maybe there's something that needs to be addressed there, but more likely than not, it's just you gravitate to people that have similar interests, similar ways of viewing life, similar hobbies, and you're a kindred spirit. Like, you connect with those people. So I don't know. I think that's a way to avoid offense too. When you are in community, just knowing, like we've talked about, people are going to let you down. The only person that's not is the Lord.
Right.
Obviously, it's extremely important to be in community. Even in community, though, you may not connect with every single person that's a part of that.
That's okay.
Every single person that goes to my CrossFit gym, I don't know their name. I'm not friends with them, right? Like, that's not weird. But yet, in church, it would be. We'd be like, I'm offended. You don't talk to me. You know what I mean? Whereas I go in and out of the gym, I've never spoken to the person. You know what I mean?
Unrealistic expectations.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and we put those on people.
Yeah.
I think the general context is love. Yeah. Love covers a multitude of sin. It keeps no record of wrong.
Yeah.
Man, we're kind. We exemplify gentleness and the fruit of the Spirit with everybody. That is a definite. We know that. However, in the same flow of thought, the goal, hopefully, if we want to be people of substance and people that walk with stature and maturity, character, that the goal would be deep, not necessarily wide.
Yeah.
And I know, man, we live in a world that's, how many you got on Sunday? Man, I mean, that is the question that I get asked all the time. Man, how many y'all running now?
Yeah.
And maybe, my Lord, what I'm about to say is going to make me sound like an 80-year-old man. I know that. I'm 30. Okay, I'll be 30 in a couple of weeks. Gavin and I both will be 30. Our birthdays are right there.
Yeah.
But I've pastored a little bit. And in my time between children, youth, and adults, and a little bit of everything in between, a little bit of everything, I think I've finally come to peace with, man, if we can just go deep with a handful, then that handful, if we're doing it rightly, will help us reach the masses. Is it the nations? Is it everyone? Sure, but it's neighbors too. And the way that nations and the masses get reached is being faithful with a handful, like what Gavin is talking about.
Yeah.
So what we do is, and this is not a knock, this is just maybe a help or a different perspective, which is thinking through a church with small groups. We know that God is a divine community. He's Father, Son, and Spirit. So He within His own self is a community. One person, Father, Son, and Spirit, carried out in three different ways, if you will, but yet they're all one. But yet it's Father, Son, and Spirit.
Yeah.
When you wrap your head around the Trinity, come and talk to me about it, because I'd love to learn something.
Sure.
But there is something to be learned in the fact that there's a circle, like Gavin said. It's not linear, it's circle, it's not ladders, it's tables, and He wants to bring us into that. Here's the point. What we want in our community, hopefully, is that our community models the Trinity, which is unity, not robotic, everybody get in line and think the same way. It's we know we think differently. Sometimes we agree to disagree, and that's beautiful, and we're willing to be okay with that and still do life well together.
Yeah.
That is the goal
100%.
to me. So we don't want to be a church with small groups, like Gavin is saying. We want to be a church of small groups.
Sure.
And we have to be secure enough that that's okay. Oh, well, help me understand. Like, man, where is that? Because it is, man. You get, Jesus did it. This was Jesus. You talk about method and process. Our friend Tom Thomas, Tom's a leader at our church. Tom's a process guy. Man, me and Dad and Gavin, man, we'll just be, man, boom, And Tom's got vision too, but even Tom's going to take that vision. He's going to say, all right, how do we put those boots on the ground?
Yeah.
He does that with me with church stuff, but I so need that because I get excited. Man, we can go here, but he's thinking, all right, Monday morning, how do I put boots on the ground to go see that happen?
Yeah.
And this is how this looks. Jesus knows, I want every single person to come to salvation. Man, I don't want anybody to die and go to hell.
Yeah.
My goal is to shed my blood. The joy set before me, He endured the cross.
Yeah.
He had us in mind when He died on Calvary's Hill. So, and the way that He did it, Gavin, fascinates me, bro. It's like the way that He went about doing this was with 3 men and 12 men.
Yeah.
I bring up the 3. Did He have 12? Yes, the 12 disciples, the 12 apostles, of course. But man, there was even an inner circle inside of the 12.
Yeah.
Because He knew Peter, James, and John. My mentor and the guy that kind of fathers me, his name is Michael Dow. He lives in Orlando, Florida. He told me this week, actually. He goes, there are just certain things in a one-on-one environment that atmosphere allows that it cannot, even if there's 3 or 4 couples, and certainly if there's 50, 60, 70, 100 or more folks.
Yeah.
We think 100 people,
Yeah.
man, that's not a lot of people.
Yeah.
Gavin, that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
If we're doing it the kingdom way.
That's right.
And if your church is 5,000 people, 10,000 people, or 50, man, praise God. That's awesome, man. You got to be who God's calling you to be.
That's right.
I just think the call for Gavin and I in our community is like living out what I'm going to read right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. there are 13 passages between Acts, Romans, Corinthians, Colossians, and Philemon. Some people say Philemon, some people say Philemon. Whatever, okay? With those chapters and verses that I just referenced, Acts 2, Acts 5, I'm not going to read them all. They met house to house. Bro, they're in Cornelius' house, Mary's house, the jailer's house, Lydia's house, Priscilla and Aquila's house, Philemon's house. What's the point I'm trying to make? That should be the primary way that we relate to each other.
Yeah.
And we cannot go deep with the masses,
Yeah.
but we can go deep with a handful.
That's right.
And we got to know who our handful is. And for you in this season, it might look like one person.
Yeah.
For some of us that maybe have a little bit more capacity and grace for that in this season, small kids play a factor in that, bedtimes and routines and our jobs, all of that plays a factor in it. You might just be, man, I think one person. That's great. I would encourage you, go deep with one person.
Yeah.
And there's fruit that'll come from that.
100%. No, and it's like you say. I mean, we're called to be disciples, and we're being discipled by something, without a doubt. Whether that's our phones,
Say
whether
wow.
that's culture, whatever it is, you know. And I think again, that's just. And hey, maybe it's one of those things you have to see. We're just doing life together. Meaning, I mean, there are times we get together in houses and we don't even read scripture.
Yeah.
We just eat.
Just eat.
You know what I mean? Like,
But that's holy.
yeah, it doesn't have. There's no like 1 + 1 is 2. It's just being together. And there are other times where obviously there's an expression where it's like, hey, someone's got a real need. We're gonna stop. We're gonna pray. Like in this moment, you know. Again, it's just being together. And I think like, you know, just putting all of those pieces together. It's just, if we're people who want to grow, right? We want to do life well. Then I'm telling you, community is important. Whether you're a Christian or not, community happens. Military, gangs, football teams, we gravitate to it. Social clubs, the country club, gyms. You look around, online video games. I mean, people Twitch together. People have, you know, Reddit threads. I mean, I'm just saying, any area of interest you look.
Yep.
World of Warcraft, they have guilds. They jump in together. They raid together. People want to be
Yep.
together. It's biologically in us. So it's important to not be alone. We're saved unto something.
All the introverts out there hating this. Go
Yeah.
ahead. Go ahead, bro. Go ahead.
Like, I want to go just be by myself.
And we need that too.
Yeah.
We need to be by
Yeah.
ourselves too.
Yeah.
Gavin and I are talking about a more generic
Yeah.
principle that is very important.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, like your one-on-one time with the Lord's
Gotta have
extremely
that. Your
important.
spouse, your children.
Yeah, it's not one or the other. It's just, this is a piece, I guess, for us that gets highlighted.
Absolutely.
Because for a lot of people, especially where we live geographically in the South, church is just a very event-driven. I go on Sunday morning, do my good duty, and that's great. Like, obviously, you're getting something out of it. Go be a part of it. And even if you're not, like, to me, people will ask, you know, because it's a church plant. Well, how's the church doing? And you're like, I think it's great, man. To me, it's the community. Like, that's what I enjoy. The one-on-one. You know, like.
Yep.
I mean, for the longest, we didn't want to call it a church. You know.
We were scared.
Yeah, like
we had to
wanna
have
be
our
a church,
definitions
you know?
purified.
Yeah, it's just like, no, man. We just want to be together. We just want to be together and spend time with one another and help each other, give wisdom to one another. You know, the ecosystem. I benefit you. You benefit me.
Definitions are so important.
Yeah. It's just important. It just really is. So, anything else on your heart?
Yep. No, bro. I don't think so.
Yeah. Staying on the potter's wheel, you know, and what that means is letting God just mold us.
That's exactly right.
And sure, He can supernaturally beam down mindset changes.
He's sovereign. He can do whatever he
can.
wants to.
But His method, I think, normally is what we're talking about. Being around other people and letting others, you rub against people and being changed over time and growing through that.
Here we go. This is the thought I just had.
Yeah.
And we're done. Unless Gavin says we're not done. Millennials, I gotta shout out our people, man.
Yeah.
Millennials, we do this pretty well.
Yeah.
We really do, Gavin. I've recently been really encouraged by this. Mine and Gavin's generation of people, if you're a part of that millennial generation, what we figured out was COVID was a game changer in regards to the necessity and how essential we realized this reality that we're talking about today on this episode really is.
Yeah.
And millennials do this pretty well as a whole, my opinion. John Tanner, who I do my podcast with, even like my dad, Tom, different guys that we reference, whatever, that are later in their 40s, 50s, maybe in their 60s. Sat with Dr. Mike McCartney, local dentist here in town. He's almost 60 now. Their generation and the way that they did it was, I don't need any freaking body.
Yeah, that's right.
Excuse my terminology, but it was like,
I am a self-made man.
Kobe Bryant, give me the dang ball.
Yeah.
I'm going to score it.
Yeah.
The rest of y'all just watch it happen.
Yeah.
But what that was I have to prove that I can do everything well and I can do it by myself.
Yeah.
And that's not the most excellent way. Can we get stuff done? Do we need good work ethic? Yes, of course. Sometimes we got to grind it out. My friend Josh Owen and I were talking about that this morning. Sometimes you just have to grind it out. Blinders on, I'm focused for 90 days. Boom.
Yeah.
But as a general rule, man, it's about bringing other people into it. So I just wanted to say that about the generational thing, because I think it is important that our generation has a natural inclination to just pull people with us. Man, let's go to the game together. Let's go eat together.
Yeah.
We do it really well and we do it really naturally. The older generation, those that Gavin and I are fortunate enough to do life with, man, we honor you guys and we're really thankful for them, because really that's not the way that they came up.
Yeah.
And even Dad has shared some of that stuff with us, man. Back then it was just, I don't know because I wasn't living, but they have told us.
Yeah.
I mean, it was go to work, make a living, live in a box, do your thing, check the box, go to the next day. And there's a fuller way to live, and now their hearts are turned toward us to say, let's do it together. Let's join hands, let's link arms.
Well, and I think too, it's like, the thought I have with that is it can be an inconvenient way to live.
It is
being inconvenient. Being in community can be very inconvenient.
Yeah.
Because you put that out there and then, they call, they're on the side of the road. Or you call and you need somebody to fix your washer. Or they need advice about a situation. It can be very inconvenient. So I think a lot of people shy away from it for that reason, which is normal, natural. I think for me at least, it's just like the benefit of being together in my growth, in my spiritual growth, in my financial growth, in my business. Like you can just, like you referenced earlier, there's an exponential growth that happens.
There's no doubt.
When you do life in a community, so it's worth the inconvenience.
There's no doubt.
And it's scriptural, it's biological. You look around, like it's woven into the fabric of the universe. We're not supposed to be alone.
Come on, man.
And when we are not living to our best and our most excellent potential that the Lord has for us, whether you're a Christian or not. He still has potential for you. Does that make sense? And so I think that's why it's just so important, because you can go fast alone, but you cannot go far alone.
Or deep.
Yeah, and our goal is to do things like we talked about in our last episode that impact our kids and our grandkids and are generational, and we see change in our community that are positive, and you just can't do all that stuff if you're just out there by yourself. You don't have capacity for it. You know what I mean? You need people to help you through that process. So I don't know. It's a beautiful thing, and I'm super thankful.
Me too.
We have it, and if you don't get it, you got to go find it.
Find it.
Whatever that looks like. So,
yeah.
I had a blast. This is fun.
A ton of fun, man. Thanks for having me on.
I appreciate you coming. Hey, until next time. See you guys.
Yeah. See you later.
Thank you for joining us on the Do Life Well podcast, where we explore topics like fatherhood, business, health, wellness, and so much more. With each episode, we aim to inspire and guide you in embracing the art of doing life well. If you found value in today's conversation, please leave us a review, subscribe, and share with your friends. Until next time, continue the journey of doing life well.